Exactly a year ago, I posted my SMSL VMV-D1 SE video, which at that time was the nicest ESS Sabre DAC of SMSL. It had everything you needed to succeed, including some great sonics to match its lineage, and for about a year that was actually the DAC to get below $1 grand. And you nasty SMSL, you did it again with the release of SU-10. And while this is part of their SU series, this is their highest performing DAC from that series, I do believe that it should be part of their VMV or high-end series because in many ways it feels like a direct successor to D1 SE. But does it stand a chance versus similarly priced converters or maybe pricier ones? Please keep watching as you'll find your answers today. I have complained about weird looking cases of SMSL many times by now, about asymmetrical bodies, asymmetrical displays, and just weird design decisions. And I'm not sure if they hired another designer, but it feels like that because I really like what I see with the SU-10. Of course, it has a machined aluminum case with this matte black paint with a very fine grain. They went with a 2-inch LCD screen, which is protected by a layer of glass. And in all honesty, I cannot say a single bad word about its build quality and looks. And since we're talking about SMSL, this is already a very good starting point. It has one of the simplest front panels that you can see on any DAC, with just a volume knob that also works as a mini navigator or as an on-off button. And of course you have a simple LCD screen in the middle, and that's pretty much it. On its back, you'll find every possible digital input as USB Type-B, Type-C, optical, coaxial, AAC, I2S, and a Bluetooth antenna socket. There's a pair of RCA and XLR outputs, and both can be controllable or fixed, depending on the settings. As for tech inside it, first and foremost, high-end audio starts with an outstanding power supply design. So kill the noise at its inception until it becomes a much bigger problem down the road. And that's exactly what SMSL did with the SU-10 because it has two linear and regulated non-radial transformers. One for its digital side and one for its analog side, and that's a very common practice in high-end audio applications. While they used the good old ES-9038 Pro from ESS Technologies, it doesn't use a single DAC chip, but two DAC chips from which all 16 channels have been used. And that's something that SMSL never did before, and that already excites me to the core. And of course, to use all 16 channels from those ES-9038 Pro, you need to have a very beefy output stage, a very beefy current to voltage conversion stage. And that's exactly, again, what SMSL did because it has 21 OPA op-amps, and that's pretty much the beefiest output stage that I see on any DAC made by SMSL. I never saw anything remotely close in units costing as much, and I'm pretty sure that this thing will push dynamics like crazy. They also made their own clock management chip encapsulated in a metal enclosure. There's a brand new XMOS receiver that unlocked an MQA decoder. The latest Bluetooth chipset from Qualcomm is also present that supports all the latest codecs. All in all, SMSL used the most impressive ESS Sabre implementation I've seen thus far, and my ears are already begging for some music, so let's hit some eardrums. Sometimes people are associating the ESS Sabre sound with a highly detailed one, very transparent one, but lacking emotions, lacking naturalness, lacking a very lifelike timbre. And sometimes that is true, sometimes not so much, and sometimes that is plain wrong. And from the ESS Sabre Mafia, the ones that I clearly remember as having them all, with no exceptions, had something in common. And that was a very beefy and powerful output stage and some sort of audio-grade transformers. Starting with SMSL VMV-D1 SE, moving to own S8, and then to something much pricier like Gustard X26 Pro, Matrix X Sabre Pro, Matrix, Element X, all of them sounded just outstanding. Their vocal performance was just to die for, very real, very lifelike in a way. And they all pushed a high dose of dopamine into my bloodstream because those were very engaging, very powerful, not only in the bass, but also in the mid-range and in the treble as well. You just need to find the right unit at the right price. When I'm testing DA converters that are going past 1 kilobuck, I'll try to be as descriptive, as in-depth as possible. I'll try to be very critical about their performance. But below that price point, I have a strong feeling that something will not be hitting its mark, being in terms of transit response, detail retrieval, naturalness, depth, stage size, something will not sound that great. While this one goes below 1 kilobuck, it goes for $8.99, I believe. If I'm connecting this one to a Syncser SU-6 DDC via I2S, then this is easily the best DAC that I've heard at that exact price point, or slightly below 1 kilobuck. And up until I'm reaching that Gustard X26 Pro, which is marginally better compared to this one, this is the DAC to get. For me at least, with my ears, with my gear, with my music, this is just outstanding. And if you watched my Ever Solo DAC Z8 review, which was really explosive sounding the bass, very nimble, very dynamic, this one is pretty much the same, just more technical, more faster a little bit, and a little wider sounding and deeper sounding as well. An oversized power supply and output stage left a huge mark when music starts playing, because this one was never thin, it was never lifeless. On the contrary, it was very dynamic, very alive, very punchy sounding while being very clean sounding at the same time. Now I'm listening to plenty of tunes, very old ones like Django Reinhardt, for example. Several tunes have almost 100 years, and I like them for their very natural soul-grabbing experience, but also for their imperfections. And several DACs are trying to hide those imperfections, are trying to beautify my music. Several DACs are trying to highlight those imperfections a lot more. And I like my DACs to not do that at all. I want them to leave that softness, that soft noise untouched. And luckily, SU-10 is not doing like that, anything like that. It just leaves everything as I know it to be on my high-end DAC. So in many ways, it sounds like a high-end DAC, while costing way less. After putting it on so many tunes in a span of 2 weeks, it was clear to me that I'm experiencing a very fine sounding DAC. And while I did hear better sounding units, those were about 2 times as expensive. I'm about that Gustard X26 Pro. I don't remember getting so excited and so impressed about a unit costing as little as $8.99. And if you are a music lover first and then an audiophile later on, then it will impress you more compared to, say, a topping D90 SE, SMSL, D1 SE, Ever Solo DAC Z8, and AUN S8. Going a little deeper and talking about specifics, easily the most impressive part about SU-10 is surely detail retrieval and transparency, because it easily outplayed and outperformed units like topping D90 SE, Gustard X18. And while it's not as mellow, slow, musical sounding like their VMV D2, this one was clearly more detailed, it was bringing forward more information, even if this one is almost 2 times less expensive. If you like hearing things that you are not supposed to, like mastering errors, like imperfections, maybe beautiful intricacies, then this one will bring that forward so easily without flexing anything, really. It never highlighted the treble output more than what it should, and I do believe it was always under a very strict control, trying to bring that information up while drowning everything that has to do with glare and listening fatigue. And later on, I tried this one with a Syncser SU-6 DDC via I2S, and what was a very strong 10 out of 10 in terms of detail retrieval. Transparency just went up to 11. It felt like unlocking a high resolution mode. Everything felt a little clearer, a little bit more detailed. The change was definitely there, but not as much as it was the case with VMVD2 already suggesting an amazing clock management and noise rejection of the SU-10. Moving on to transit response, there's a local folk rock band that always works as morale booster in the mornings, especially for me. And I remember listening to that one and I felt a massive wave of energy going forward, massive wave of mid-bass energy actually. And that happened with those small Musician Night 1 speakers. There was a little bit more oomph, more rumble compared to the Gold Note Distant Plus, which, mind you, is also very impressive in the bass and also it's slightly more expensive. Not slightly, it's more expensive. So clearly, this one was not lacking in terms of dynamics, bass punch, bass energy, everything that has to do with bass. And I do believe that it always tries to press that gas pedal to the floor. It tries to be ahead of its game in terms of speed, but also impact. After about 2 weeks of testing, it was clear to me that SMSL crafted not only the most resolving and clean sounding DAC in their portfolio, but also the meanest and the most impactful sounding one as well. You should hear it roar with modern tunes, and especially when the bass is ramping up. In terms of scale, depth on Soundstage, while it will not outperform the big guys like Guster X26 Pro, R26, Denafrip Terminator Plus, Rockna Wavelight, Cordave, only mentioning those converters already tells you how I feel about this one. So while it never limited the air travel in the room and it was never trying to break the boundaries of my living room, everything felt just perfectly arranged and it never put me on stage with those musicians. For its immaculate detail retrieval and super fast transit response, I'm giving it an undisputed 10 out of 10 because you cannot possibly beat it in there. But when it comes to scale, imaging and soundstage, I'm giving it an 8, maybe 8.5 out of 10. While bigger sounding units were bigger in size as well and pricier as well, and I know how crazy that sounds, at this exact size and weight, I think it sounds just fine and it will never limit the air travel, even without a dedicated preamp in a stereo setup. When I moved it into a stereo setup, basically replacing my Cordave, Ultima Free preamplifier, I felt that there was a small drop in terms of resolution, a bigger drop in terms of dynamics, and even a bigger drop in terms of scale depth on soundstage. But clearly it was not by about 20 times less impressive as the price might suggest. So it was not trying to break the boundaries of my room, it was not trying to sound like behind that wall, like behind that TV, as Cordave is sounding by default, but still it was impressive as a DAC and preamplifier. You can easily use this one as DAC and preamp with powered loudspeakers, with passive loudspeakers, and you can buy a preamp later on if you please. But if you want the best results, use this one as a DAC only unit, where it gave everything and approached so close to an endgame DAC performance-wise. Moving on to frequency response, SU-10 offers what I believe can be described as godly bass performance. It was omnipresent, it was punchy, it was alive, but also very detailed. A metal tune started playing and I simply couldn't take away my focus from that juicy bass guitar that felt almost abusive at times. Sometimes it feels like overpowering parts of the mid-range, but that's not really the case, because if you are coming from a dead flat DAC, it will appear that way, but no, it's exactly how high-end DACs are sounding. All my DACs are sounding like that. While SU-10 won't outperform their VMV-D2 in terms of mid-range and everything that has to do with mid-range, it was definitely fuller bodied and it was meatier sounding versus a topping D90 SE and Guster X18. And after following this one with a high-end tube amplifier, I've got one of the most beautiful mid-range renditions, getting all the sweetness, all the warmth I could possibly desire. Voices carried plenty of emotions and it was trying to hint an organic mid-range without getting into that art war sound. As for treble, I tried some nasty treble intensive tracks, some raw cymbals, some fast double drums, and it didn't make me lower the volume of my music. So it won't scare you with such music, and you should expect hearing everything in those regions. Bells and cymbals ring nicely without getting a nasty post-ringing, like a few SU-10 DACs might be doing, and as a whole it felt well balanced and tightly controlled, walking towards the natural and full-bodied path rather than the ultra-linear one. As for my conclusions, at affordable prices, audio makers are trying to economize as much as possible by using some questionable components, some weak output stages, some mediocre power supplies, but luckily that is not happening with the SU-10, and it does feel like a breath of fresh air. At its price point, I wouldn't change one single thing on SU-10, not a single capacitor, resistor or diode. It went wild with dynamics, it was always rich and full-bodied, something that I can rarely say about SU-10 DACs at any price points. And finally, I think that SMSL has a winner on their hands and not a disposable hero that will be forgotten soon. It approached so close to what I would call as endgame material, and for all of the reasons combined, I believe that it easily won my highest praise and award. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed my review. A much longer, in-depth review can be found below. Please check that out, and as usual, listen to more tunes, be positive, and I'll see you soon. Cheers!